The GallowgateShots podcast is sponsored by TyreSpot, the North East's leading tyre supplier with branches across the region. TyreSpot don't just do tyres, they cover everything from servicing to wheel alignment. They can handle every aspect of your car's maintenance. For more information, visit tyrespot.co.uk. Enjoy the episode.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the GallowgateShots YouTube and podcast channel. We are finally back after what seems forever since the last game of the season. Pre-season is upon us, and today we are going to talk about a true Newcastle United servant. A Newcastle United, can we call him a legend yet? Yes, he was a legend, and that is the one and only
Callum Wilson!
Yes, we are going to be talking about Callum Wilson, from goal machine to cup winner. Wilson's time on Tyneside has given us plenty to shout about, just like our good friend from West Ham has just done there. And I'm Scott, as you're probably all aware, and I am joined by Daryl, by Ian, and by Andy. Boys, we've seen the lads come back from pre-season training. We saw the last game of the season where we did get beat by Everton, but we saw those emotional after game shots where Callum Wilson was saying goodbye to the Gallowgate end, and it was a bit of a will he, won't he? Is he coming back? Is he not? He's went off to America. He's doing his punditry at the Club World Cup. Not that I've watched much of it. Not his punditry, by the way. I mean the football. But if we got the final confirmation on Monday, there was a early leak from Fabrizio Romano. There was a here we go. And then we got the final confirmation from both the club and Callum Wilson to say that he's ended his tenureship, shall we say. He's not renewing his contract. Just before we get into what we're going to talk about, boys, what was your initial reaction just to that news? And what was his departure? What did it mean to you boys just when you heard it?
I was a bit gutted, to be honest with you. It felt like the end of an era. Felt like it was like the Longstaff news we're getting as well. It's probably time for him to move on. But we're getting to that point with the squad now where those players that have been with us pre Eddie Howe and pre the Saudis are starting to sort of make their way out, and the squad's really sort of moving on. So I am sad because we'll get into it. I'd say he's a modern legend. He's maybe not an all-time legend, but certainly in our lifetimes, he's in the dark times being one of the only bits of light we had, and then going into the good times, he's been a mainstay and a top pro. So we're really sad to see him go. I think we all knew when he was crying at the Gallowgate he was on his way out. There was maybe a glimmer of hope. I think we heard he might have been offered like a pay-as-you-play thing, but that was never really sustainable with what we want to be doing. So yeah, sad. Yeah,
sad times indeed. And Daryl, mate, we're going to take a little look at some of his stats, because I think unfairly, I know, I'm going to be honest, what I've seen online and on social media, it hasn't been the case, but he could potentially be seen as, he's very injury prone, and that's the latter stage of his career. But we can break down his output over his last 5 seasons with Newcastle. And what do the stats tell us about his consistency and his finishing at the club over those 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, it like you say, it's very easy to go down one of two routes here. You either look at his prowess in front of goal and everything that he's done in a positive light, or you just go down the other route of, the negative side of it about his injury record and that. But we're not going to do that here. We're going to look at the good stuff, because, to be honest, and I said this to my mate yesterday when the news broke, and I was like, you know what? He was with us during some very dark times, and he saw us into the beginning of this new era at the club with the new ownership. And then, unfortunately, through his fitness, it's going to come to an end. And it is quite sad, because you think, and you look back over the last 5 years, and he's seen us through some incredible highs. I'd go back to even start with the fact that he scored the first goal of the new era in that game against Tottenham. In like the second or third minute of that game, everything looked rosy, even though we went on to lose that game. that was the catalyst. It was the very first goal of the new era. But again, that was already, a good year or two into his tenure at the club. And, he made 130 appearances for the club in all competitions, 113 in the Premier League, and that's including 81 starts with those 130 appearances. During his 5 years at the club have actually played 229 matches, which sort of hints to the problem that he's had with his own personal fitness. And that came to a head in the 2020-2021 season, where he missed a lot of games in that season. But that was then followed by his most prolific season at the club, which was the 22-23 season, as we charged towards the Champions League for the first time in 20 years, where he got 18 goals and 5 assists in that season. So that was averaging 0.95 goals and assists per 90 minutes. And, 49 Premier League appearances, 149 goals in all appearances, 47 Premier League goals in those times. And he's the third highest Premier League goal scorer that we have at the club. Obviously, that's only bettered by Shearer and Alex Isak, but I think there was a stat when he broke a record not too long ago. He's done it. He's reached 47 Premier League goals faster than Les Ferdinand did. Let's put it that way. And we all love
it is classed as a legend.
Exactly, yeah. And as much as it's took Callum 5 years in which to do that, because he's been here longer than Sir Les was, he still did it in a record number of games. And his overall stats, we just mentioned there about his 0.95 goals and assists per 90 minutes. In terms of his entire career at the club, his goals per 90 are 0.42, and his minutes per goal is 142.6. Now, that is still an incredible record, because he consistently takes high-quality chances inside the box when he's presented with them. And he's overperformed in terms of his XG stats in 3 out of the 5 seasons he's been at the club.
He's also only been in a good team for like a year and a half of that.
Yeah.
When he's been fit
exactly.
as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, Andy. Obviously,
it's crazy, isn't it?
We look at him and how he got us out of those. We'll talk. We'll call them the dark ages, shall we say? The Steve Bruce era, where it was lump at a Maxi, see what he can do, and see if he can set up Wilson. I think that was the tactic for a lot of that Steve Bruce era. But really, you look at Wilson and how we fit into the tactics over the years, and especially under Eddie Howe. We forget that he came in as the number 7, although we should have really had that number 9 spot from day one. It was only because Joe Linton was there, and let's be honest, Joe Linton shouldn't really have been playing up front. We all know where he should be playing. But what made Callum Wilson such an effective number 9 at Newcastle United?
Yeah, it seems like we've had so many eras of Wilson since he started here. I remember when we signed him, my memory of him at Bournemouth was that he was this rapid, sort of lethal finisher, and I think we were all a bit surprised when he came to us that he was more of a sort of well-rounded striker than we thought. He came in during probably the single worst team I've seen in my lifetime under Bruce, and to have effectively no tactical instructions and be a striker who really thrives off service, and to be in a team that gave him no service. The fact he managed to score a single goal was pretty impressive, really. But in those times, what we really needed, because we had someone like St. Maximin who would create something out of nothing, but what we really needed was, when something was created out of nothing, for someone to be there who could put it away. And it was similar to when we had someone like Gale in the Championship, where teams were just defending constantly. We just needed a player to put the ball in the net, and that's what he did in those early days. And he completely bailed us out in those years, 100%.
Yeah.
We couldn't defend for Toffee. We obviously had that amazing Joe Willock period where he just single-handedly won us like 9 games in a row. But other than that, it was really Wilson just doing everything. So in that period, you've got to just say to him, you had no instructions, no proper coaching, and you still managed to drag us through it. So there's that side of it. And obviously, with Howe reunited with Daddy Howe, as he used to say on his podcast with Antonio, and you could see straight away that he thrived on being able to drop a bit deeper, hold the ball up, and have those early Eddie Howe seasons where it was just constantly overlaps on that right hand side, and he was getting lots of service. I really remember his goal against Forest at the first game of the first full Eddie Howe season, when he just ran across the defender and flicked it top corner. Yeah, and that was basically all he did in the entire game. But it was like the sort of chance that he would have got under Bruce, but he was getting those chances under Howe, little snap, half chances, putting them away, but then also getting the other chances. And that's why we saw him have such a good, prolific season. And in that stage, that's all we needed. And if you remember that Burnley game, the first win we got in that season, it was a similar thing where we were still pretty rubbish at that point. Howe hadn't had the chance to get any of his ideas across really, other than just run really hard. And he got that one chance, put it in the top of the net. Nick Pope actually did terrible for that goal, incidentally. But put it away, and that was it. We were motoring, and you've got to say, without him, who knows what situation we'd be in. We might not have the Saudis, we might not have Eddie Howe. You just don't know. And then obviously just coming to an end of his tenure, obviously there was probably only really 6 months when him and Isak were really on par with each other, really pushing each other. And that was a beautiful sight when we had two proper strikers, our number 9 and our number 14, gunning for the top spot. And then obviously injuries again. And then I think just generally, I think he just lost that yard of pace, lost that sharpness. As we got better, he became a sort of smaller fish in a big pond, and I just don't think that really suited him. So it'll be really interesting to see what he does next. I think he'll do a decent job if he goes back to Coventry or something like that, or even going to Leeds or maybe a smaller Premier League team to keep it in, because he's still got quality. I just think he doesn't really fit what we need now, so it was time for him.
Yeah, I mean, before we come on to kind of the final piece of this, but what he means to us from a fan point of view, let's talk a little bit about what we think Wilson might do next. Ian, is punditry, is it coaching? Is he still got legs in him? Can he play lower league? Will he do a bit of a Dwight Gale and drop down a bit and go through? Where do you think he goes? What do you think he does?
It is an interesting one, because looking at sort of the players' reactions on their like Instagrams, their Twitters and stuff, a lot of them were saying, like, they were praising his mentality. They were calling him a mentality monster, and I think he'll still back himself to be able to play at a decent standard. So I wouldn't be surprised if he went back to someone like Coventry or team in the Championship, lower sort of caliber team in the Premier League. As Andy says, he could go into modelling. He's a good looking guy, and that's one thing we will lose, and one thing we'll miss massively is just
Fabian Schär is firmly the most attractive man in the squad now. He's lost his competition.
He definitely
Dasmo won't be able to keep May on his calendar up for 4 months after it's passed anymore.
No.
But no, I think
no.
Again, I think he'll back himself to be able to contribute to some team in some way. It is a little bit of a shame he's sort of last season I don't think he got a goal, a Premier League goal.
I think he got one cup goal, I think, if I remember.
Yeah,
right.
that was
Birmingham.
Maybe it was against Birmingham.
Yeah.
That was it, right? So it's a shame that he didn't get the Premier League goal. But like you have said, sort of when he first signed, I was absolutely buzzing because I was a big fan of him when he was at Bournemouth. Obviously, I know he had a few injuries at Bournemouth, and it's kind of one of those like what if he managed to stay fit, like where could he have went in terms of his career at Newcastle? Because I think he's almost missed nearly half the games. I think that was quick math based off what Dasmo was talking about just before, but still scored a hell of a lot of goals for it. So, and that's, like I say, he's missed half his time. If he had that even 3/4 of that, it'd be interesting to see what his figures would be. But no, I think he'll back himself. And I think he's just the type of person where he'll fit into wherever he goes. He seems like a proper professional. He seems very, very hungry. So, like I say, it wouldn't surprise us if he goes back to Coventry and looks for a playoff push for them and get them back in the Premier League. It would be a nice sort of like little sort of final chapter in his career.
Yeah,
I could
and
see
to
him
flip
coaching later on as well.
I think that's what he wants to do, doesn't he? A bit of coaching. He's mentioned that a couple of times on his podcast.
I think just the fact that one thing we haven't mentioned is that he was a big part of this leadership group we have in the squad as well. And we've got a few of those players like Byrne who you think will definitely be coaches in the future. I could really see him being, one of these coaches that finds his feet in the lower leagues and works his way up, because he seems like a dead bright lad as well, and really sort of tactically astute, and clearly is a really good leader, and everyone looks up to him. So you've got to think, maybe a Coventry manager in the future, they'll all look up to him. So we will miss that side of it as well. I know we haven't really touched on it yet, but
no,
good
we
leader
will
as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, what does this mean for Newcastle, Daryl, when it comes to, obviously, now we've only got 2 strikers on the books officially for now. Obviously, the transfer window is still open, but I think the question of whether we should buy another striker is a resounding yes. But
yeah,
can you replace Callum Wilson? Can you replace a like for like, or do we need to go for someone younger, maybe that go between Osula and Isak? We were looking at João Pedro quite renownedly before he went to Chelsea, and I said Coventry there. That's your fault, Andy. But what do we do? Do we replace him like for like, or do we get a completely different style of striker in?
I think it's incredibly difficult to try and find a like for like replacement. You can't get somebody that's in the same mold as Callum Wilson, because he's a bit of an enigma in that sense, and I think in terms of what the club need, it'll probably be somebody who's a lot more versatile across the front line. The Pedro link would have been the perfect example, or even in Burmo when we were linked with him, because he can play out on the wing or he can play through the middle. Both of them could do that job. Even the most recent links today, there's a link with Johan Visser as well. He can do the same job. He can play out wider. He can play through the middle. And when you look at Isak, we've used Isak in the same way as well, and even Osula. So we're wanting. I think the replacement will be somebody who's got versatility across the front. But again, it's somebody who's going to be prepared to play number 2 to Isak, because we now know that Isak is going to be the main man, and he's going to have to take his chance when it's presented to him. You look at the likes of some of the names that have already been touted. You look at like a Dominic Calvert-Lewin. I don't think that's the right way to go. His injury record, even though it's improved in the last season or two, it's still quite. It's probably even worse than Wilson's, to be fair. As much as he'll give you a physical presence and he'll be able to hold the ball up for you, it's just, I think our game is evolving away from that style. And it like I say, it'll be somebody who can play across the front. It's somebody who's going to have pace and somebody with guile.
We're definitely going to need somebody with pace, I think, given the fact that we're on the cusp of signing Elanga. So absolutely. Ian, mate, to wrap this one up before not to wrap this up, but last point before we do wrap this one up. We've talked about Wilson. We've talked about how it's going to affect Newcastle as a club, but let's talk about how Wilson has affected the fans, reaction to Wilson. It's been up and down. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. Obviously, we touched on a little bit, but what do you think he meant to fans? And are there any particular moments that stood out to you personally from Callum Wilson as a player at Newcastle United?
His goals against West Ham. He literally loved playing against them as a friend from West Ham. Go on.
Callum Wilson!
There he is.
He was just a constant thorn in their side. But I think he'll be remembered very, very 50-50 in terms of his early days, where, like you say, we were a club that was heading nowhere fast, and it was virtually him and St Maximin that bailed out the shit. He'll be looked at fondly then, and then sadly in his latter years with a lot of people will not be able to look past his injuries. But I think if we'll remember, it might have been the season, I think we finished in the Champions League, where he got the call, like he grafted his arse off and then ended up getting a call up for England, which again just shows the sort of hard work and determination and the form that he showed in that period of time. So he's came from, no disrespect to Bournemouth, a lower caliber side in them. He's come, I don't consider us giants, but he's come to a bigger club. He's then worked hard. He became the main man for a little bit, and then got an England call up in a World Cup squad as well. So I think that's probably a personal highlight and something that stands out to me as a fan. And like I think it was Andy or Dasmo was saying just before, that little brief period of time where you had Isak, who was firing on all cylinders, and if it wasn't going right for him, you then had the option to bring Wilson on. I think it was the game, maybe it's against Brentford, where both of them scored. Other than they were playing up front with each other, which was nice to see. But it's just been a nice career for him in terms of his time for us. He's sort of the epitome of where we were and now what we are. Like what Andy was saying, he scored the first goal or the only goal in the first win when Howe took over.
He took the roof off the stadium as well, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, it was class.
Again, the first goal after the takeover as well against Spurs. So he has scored some key important goals. But like I say, a lot of people have watched the podcast with Jake Humphrey, is it the high performance one? Comes across really well on there as well. And you can just tell what his mindset is and how much he backs himself. So I think, to sum up, I think he will be looked at fondly, particularly because of the times, the time that he arrived. We were desperate, to be honest, and he was one of those the only sort of shining light. And it's just been nice that he's went on that little bit of a trajectory where he was fighting relegation, then he was fighting for Champions League, then he was fighting for World Cup squads, then he was playing in the Champions League, and then in his last season he's a cup winner. So for me, it's a nice little ending to his sort of chapter with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that does round it off nicely, isn't it? Obviously, our first trophy in 70 years or 56 years if you're talking about domestic trophies. But for him to finish, it's a shame he didn't get 50 goals. I think that would have just been the little extra cherry on top of the cherry that was already on top. And you get greedy, you get 2 cherries, and he was loved by, I think, the Gallowgate end. I think everyone loved him. So
when he lost his tooth?
I remember when he lost his tooth, yeah. I remember they were shoving it back in his mouth.
He still looks stunning as well. It's a disgrace.
Yeah,
he's had some really raj injuries, like missing tooth.
Oh, yeah.
His tip fell off.
He nearly fell down the stairs on the way back from Wembley as well. Coming off the plane. So to wrap it up, boys, what's your favourite Callum Wilson moment? This can be goal, this can be celebration, it can be losing a tooth. What is it? Daryl, mate, I'm going to come to you first. Your favourite Callum Wilson moment in his 5 years at the club?
Well, Matty mentioned it on the Always Smiling Faces podcast, the overhead kick at Palace, which I was there to see. But for me, I think it'll go under the radar because of what else happened in that game with the assist of the century. But his second goal against Everton in that 4-1 win at Goodison Park, I just watched it before we recorded this, and he takes it in the D on the edge of the box, back to goal. He just swivels and takes his right foot and just bends it around the ball, and it just sails into the top corner. Pickford's got no chance with it at all.
His only goal outside the box, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. Crazy.
Just outside the box.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I'm sure he counts it. Andy, mate, let's give us yours.
I think I really loved when he did his podcast with Antonio for a while. Thought it was a really good insight. And then they had a little wager when they played each other that whoever would score would do the Macarena.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that may have been the Callum Wilson game.
Callum Wilson!
Aye. I wonder what that guy's up to now, by the way. Hope he's having a good day.
Don't know, but we're getting my money's worth.
He scored a lovely little header, just a little glanced header, and then straight away Macarena was out. And that was when the feel-good factor at the club was so high. And just the fact we had players just having wages to do dances against other players of other Premier League clubs. So I remember that. He was, just showed a lot about, he's probably a good crack in the dressing room and obviously a good goal as well. So that'll be mine.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Ian?
I've got 2. One is from like a footballing point of view. Football. And the other is a sentimental one. So the goal against Spurs, although like we said, we went on to lose, it was just, I've never heard St. James's quite like that. And it was almost like, if it was the first goal after the takeover, I was like, right, this is what we're going to be about. And it transpires that we are fairly decent, and he's been a big part of that. So just the atmosphere, the build up, and then to go, he slots it in, and within 3-4 minutes, it was just, like I said, I've never felt sort of energy like that in person. Sentimental goal was a nothing really game. I think it was the season we finished in the Champions League. We played Fulham at home. It was where Mitrovic double hit his penalty and it got ruled out. I think it was like the 89th or 90th minute. And the reason it stands out, so that was the first game that me and Sophie took Joey to. and it was for his birthday. So that was a nice little thing that I was in the Gallowgate with them. Callum Wilson scored in the last minute on Joey's birthday, so nice little sentimental one. But he's scored some class goals. And to be fair, after this, I think I'm going to go and watch all these goals that we've scored. And there'll probably be ones that I forgot that I should have mentioned, but those two stand out for me.
Nice. Yeah, I think for me, I think the overhead kick at Palace is probably my favourite goal. He's probably the only person who can do an overhead kick and stay on the ground at the same time, because he kind of just he's bent his knee like halfway between his knee and his shin. So I don't know how he's done that. That's probably what caused one of his injuries, to be fair. But no, that's for me one of them. And I think the last one, kind of an off the field moment, just his laugh on the Richie to Bournemouth. Nah, Bournemouth to Richie. That video, just his little laugh, is just a little cheeky smile, and you knew we had a good looking lad coming our way, even with a gob full of food. So yes, that is a wrap on our Callum Wilson career breakdown. Let us know in the comments below some of your favourite moments. What were your, looking back on his career? He did give us goals, he gave us grit, and do you know what? He put meaning on that number 9 shirt again, because let's be honest, over the years beforehand, or some of the years coming up to, it maybe went a bit by the wayside. So thanks to everyone for joining us. Thanks to Daryl, thanks to Ian, thanks to Andy. If you've liked this content, we have loads more coming your way in this pre-season, and then obviously for the season that's rapidly approaching us. Be sure to like, subscribe, and if you want to become a member, it's $2.99 a month. That'll get you early access to videos just like this one, as well as content throughout. Boys, thanks very much. Callum Wilson, we'll see you later. Ta-da.
Bye.
The GallowgateShots podcast is sponsored by TyreSpot, the North East's leading tyre supplier with branches across the region. TyreSpot don't just do tyres, they cover everything from servicing to wheel alignment. They can handle every aspect of your car's maintenance. For more information, visit tyrespot.co.uk. Enjoy the episode.